They told him he'd spend another Christmas at the group home, but a mysterious deed would lead him to a snow-covered farm, and a truth that would change his life forever. If you believe in second chances, and the idea that home is something you build, not just something you're given, then make sure you're subscribed. This story is for you. The day I turned 18 felt less like a celebration and more like a closing door. For 10 years, the system had been my parent, my landlord, and my warden. It was a life measured in paperwork, in scheduled meals, in the worn-out patterns of institutional linoleum. I'd slept in 7 different bedrooms, none of them mine, and learned to pack my life into a single duffel bag. 18 wasn't the explosive freedom you see in movies. It was a quiet, bureaucratic cliff edge. You get a handshake, a small check for transitional assistance, and a list of shelters. Then you're pushed, and you're expected to fly. My birthday, which also happened to be December 20th, started like any other Tuesday. The hiss of the radiator in my room, the smell of industrial-grade cleaner in the hallway, the low murmur of the other kids getting ready for school. I wasn't going. I'd already graduated, a fact that felt both like an achievement and a cosmic joke. A high school diploma was a ticket to nowhere when you had no address to put on a job application. I lay in my cot, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and traced the cracks with my eyes. They looked like a map, a river system leading to nowhere I wanted to go. I had 2 days. 2 days until my placement officially ended. 2 days until Christmas Eve, when I would walk out the front door of Northwood Youth Services for the last time and become officially a statistic. My social worker, Sarah, had been trying to soften the blow for weeks. "We'll find you a spot, Leo," she'd say, her voice radiating a practiced optimism that never quite reached her eyes. "There are programs, hostels, you're resourceful." Resourceful. That was the word they used for kids who learned to be invisible, who learned to eat fast and trust no one. It meant I was good at surviving. It didn't mean I was good at living. The plan was for me to spend Christmas at a transitional shelter downtown. Shared room, curfew, another set of rules. It was just Northwood with a different name. I'd already packed. My duffel bag sat by the door, a sad, lumpy monument to my entire existence. A few changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd stolen from a school library years ago, and a small, faded photograph of a woman I barely remembered. My mother. She was smiling, holding me as a baby. It was the only thing I owned that felt truly mine. Around 10 in the morning, the house manager knocked on my door. "Leo, Sarah's on the phone, says it's important." Important was usually bad news, a problem with my paperwork, a change in the shelter's availability. I walked down the hall to the communal office, the phone receiver already slick with the nervous sweat of a dozen other kids who'd taken calls in this room. I picked it up. "Hello. Leo, it's Sarah. Happy birthday." Her voice was different. Not just optimistic, but strange, tense. "Listen, something's come up. I need you to stay put today. A man is coming to see you this afternoon, a lawyer." A lawyer. My stomach twisted. The only time kids in the system meet lawyers is when they're in trouble. What did I do? The question came out flat, resigned. "You didn't do anything, honey, I promise. This is different. His name is Mr. Davies. He'll explain everything. Just be there, 3 o'clock, okay?" I mumbled an okay and hung up. The rest of the day crawled by in a haze of anxiety. I sat on my cot, watching snowflakes drift past the barred window. Each one was a tiny, perfect star, falling onto a world that had no place for me. A lawyer. My mind raced through every minor infraction, every bent rule, every time I'd mouthed off to a staff member. Was this it? Was my transition being revoked? Were they sending me somewhere worse? The system always had a somewhere worse. At exactly 3 o'clock, a car I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. A dark, sensible sedan that looked completely out of place against the peeling paint of the group home. A man in a thick wool overcoat got out. He was older, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from patient stone. He carried a leather briefcase. Mr. Davies. He was buzzed in, and I met him in the small, sterile visitation room. It had 2 plastic chairs and a table bolted to the floor. A faint smell of bleach hung in the air. He sat opposite me, placing his briefcase on the table with a soft click. He didn't offer a handshake. He just looked at me, his eyes calm and assessing. "Mr. Novak," he began, his voice a low, dry rumble. "My name is Arthur Davies. I was the attorney for your maternal grandfather, William Miller." The name hit me like a stone. William Miller. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. He was a ghost, a name on a form. The reason my file listed my father as unknown and my mother as deceased. I had a vague, dreamlike memory of him. The scent of sawdust and pipe smoke. A calloused hand holding mine. But it was faint, like a story someone else had told me. He died when I was 6 or 7, right before my mother's life unraveled completely, and I was swept into foster care. "My grandfather," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's correct," Mr. Davies said, his expression unchanged. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Miller passed away 10 years ago. His will, however, contained a rather specific set of instructions. Certain assets were to be held in trust until his sole heir, you, reached the age of legal majority. That is to say, your 18th birthday, which is today." He slid the envelope across the table. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. It felt impossibly heavy. I could feel the sharp edges of documents inside. "I don't understand," I said. "Assets? What assets? There was nothing. We had nothing. Your grandfather was not a wealthy man in conventional terms," Mr. Davies explained, his gaze steady. "But he was a landowner. He owned a small farm in a town called Havenwood, about 120 acres, a house, a barn. Upon his death, and with your mother unable to assume ownership, the property was placed into a testamentary trust. I have been its executor for the past decade. As of this morning, the trust is dissolved. The property, its contents, and all associated liabilities now belong to you." He let the words hang in the air. A farm, a house, belonged to me. It sounded like a language from another planet. The world I knew was measured in square feet of shared space, in temporary placements. The concept of owning land, a building, was so alien it felt like a prank. I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded, brittle document, a deed. My name, Leo Miller Novak, was typed in crisp black ink at the top. There was a set of old iron keys held together with a piece of wire, and a one-way bus ticket to a town I'd never heard of. Havenwood. Departure time was 7 a.m. the next morning. "This can't be real," I whispered, staring at the keys. They were heavy, real, cold to the touch. "I assure you, it is quite real," Mr. Davies said. "There are, however, complications. The property has been vacant for 10 years. It is likely in a state of disrepair. More significantly, there are substantial back taxes owed to the county. Nearly 10 years' worth." Of course there was a catch. There was always a catch. The system gives you a birthday gift and it comes with a bill. So, I own a place I can't afford to keep. "Potentially," he conceded. However, the will also stipulated that a small cash account be made available to you for immediate needs. It's not much, but it should cover your travel and initial expenses. The funds have been deposited into a new account in your name. This is your debit card." He slid a thin white envelope across the table. "The PIN is the last 4 digits of your birth year." I looked from the deed to the keys to the debit card. My life, which an hour ago had a clear, bleak trajectory, shelter, poverty, anonymity, had just fractured into a million confusing pieces. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but something else was creeping in around the edges. A flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was just possibility. A question mark where a period used to be. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. "Why did he do this? Why didn't anyone tell me?" Mr. Davies' expression softened for the first time. "Your grandfather was a complicated man, Leo. He loved your mother very much, and he loved you. He believed a person needed roots, a place to stand. He wanted you to have that, even if he couldn't be there to give it to you himself. As for why you weren't told, those were his instructions. He didn't want you to be a child burdened by the idea of a property you couldn't access. He wanted you to be given the choice as an adult, a clean slate, he called it." A clean slate. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, not from cold or fear anymore, but from the sheer, crushing weight of it all. A home, a place to stand. "What do I do now?" I asked, the question aimed more at the universe than at the man in front of me. "That," Mr. Davies said, closing his briefcase, "is entirely up to you. You can take that bus tomorrow morning, or you can throw that deed in the trash and proceed with your original plans. The choice, for the first time in a long time, is yours." He stood up, a silent signal that our meeting was over. "My card is in the envelope. Call me if you have questions, and Mr. Novak, happy birthday." He left me there in that sterile room, with a ghost's legacy spread out on the table in front of me. The deed felt like a map to a forgotten world. The keys felt like a weapon or a prayer. For 10 years my life had been a straight line drawn by other people. Now the path had forked. One way led to the familiar cold of the shelter, the predictable struggle I knew how to navigate. The other led into the snow, into the unknown, to a broken-down farmhouse in a town called Havenwood. It was a choice between a comfortable prison and a terrifying freedom. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the room pressing in on me, and I knew, with a certainty that was both exhilarating and horrifying, that I couldn't stay. I had to see it. I had to know. I picked up the bus ticket. My journey was just beginning. The next morning, the world was gray and silent. A fresh blanket of snow had fallen overnight, muffling the city sounds and painting everything in shades of white and charcoal. I was up before anyone else, the duffel bag feeling heavier on my shoulder than it ever had before. It was filled with the same old things, but I was carrying something new now, the weight of a name, a place, an inheritance. I didn't say many goodbyes. What was there to say? Good luck felt hollow, and see you around was a lie. I just nodded at the night shift staff member, who grunted in reply, and pushed open the heavy front door. The cold air bit at my face, sharp and clean. For a decade, that door had been a barrier. Now, it was a threshold. I walked down the unshoveled path, my boots making the first tracks in the new snow, and I didn't look back. The bus station was a cavern of echoes and dim, fluorescent light. People drifted through it like ghosts. Some running toward something, others running away. I felt like I was doing both at the same time. I found my gate, bought a lukewarm coffee and a stale pastry with my new debit card. The transaction felt monumental, my own money, my own choice. It was a small thing, but it felt like the first breath of air after being underwater for a long time. The bus ride was a long, rumbling meditation. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and watched the world transform. The dense grid of the city gave way to the sprawling, identical houses of the suburbs. Then the suburbs thinned out, replaced by strip malls and highways. And finally, those too fell away, leaving only wide-open fields and dark, sleeping forests. The snow was thicker out here, clinging to the branches of pine trees and piling in soft drifts against weathered fences. It was a world I had only seen in pictures, a quiet, stark, and beautiful emptiness. My mind was a whirlwind. I kept replaying my conversation with Mr. Davies, a farm, back taxes, a choice. I pulled the keys from my pocket. They were old-fashioned skeleton keys, heavy and ornate. I wondered what doors they opened. What had my grandfather been like? The fragments of memory I had were like old, faded photographs. A deep laugh, the rough texture of a flannel shirt, the smell of soil. He was a myth, a character in the tragic story of my childhood. Now, he was suddenly real. A man who owned land, who wrote a will, who had thought of me, even when he was gone. The bus made stops in a series of small towns that all seemed to blur together, each with a single main street, a gas station, and a church steeple. With every stop, the bus grew emptier. Finally, the driver called out, "Havenwood, last stop." I was the only one who got off. The bus pulled away with a hiss of air brakes, leaving me standing in an almost impossible silence. Havenwood wasn't so much a town as a crossroads. There was a general store with a gas pump out front, a post office, and a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "Eat." That was it. Everything was covered in at least a foot of snow. The air was so cold it felt sharp in my lungs. There were no taxis, no people on the street, just the low hum of the coolers inside the general store and the gentle whisper of wind through the pines. For a moment, a wave of pure panic washed over me. What had I done? I was in the middle of nowhere, miles from anything I knew, with nothing but a name and a set of keys. I pushed down the fear and walked into the general store. The bell above the door chimed, and a wave of warm air smelling of coffee and sawdust washed over me. An old man with a magnificent white beard sat behind the counter reading a newspaper. He looked up at me over his spectacles. "Help you, son?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I'm looking for the Miller farm," I said, my voice sounding small and thin. The man's eyebrows rose. He put down his paper and studied me for a long moment. "The old Miller place? Haven't heard that name in a while. No one's been up there since William passed. You family?" "He was my grandfather," I said. The man's expression softened. "Well, you must be Leo. William used to talk about you. Said you'd be back someday." He stuck out a large, calloused hand. "Name's George. I run this place. Knew your grandfather my whole life." Someone knew my name. Someone knew my grandfather. The idea was so staggering I just stood there for a second before shaking his hand. He talked about me? "All the time," George said with a nod. "I felt terrible about your situation, but he always said he was doing what he had to do to keep you safe. Said one day you'd understand." He looked me up and down. "You got a ride up there? It's a good 3 miles up the ridge and the road ain't been plowed." "No, I was going to walk." George let out a short laugh. "Not in this snow, you're not. You'd be a popsicle before you got to the mailbox. Tell you what, my boy's out back with the truck. He can run you up. Let me get you some supplies first. Place has been shut up for a decade. No power, no heat. You'll need lamps, kerosene, some food." He moved around the store with a surprising quickness, grabbing things from the shelves, a box of matches, 2 kerosene lamps, a jug of fuel, canned soup, bread, a thick wool blanket. He seemed to know exactly what I would need. I paid for it all with my card, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and overwhelming dependence. An hour ago, I was completely alone. Now, this stranger was helping me, talking about my grandfather like he was still alive, like he was a part of this place. George's son, a quiet young man named Ben, loaded my duffel bag and the supplies into the back of an old, beat-up pickup truck with a plow on the front. The ride up the ridge was slow and noisy, the truck's engine groaning as it pushed through the deep snow. The farther we got from the town, the wilder the landscape became. The trees crowded in closer to the road, their branches heavy with white. It was beautiful, but it was an intimidating, lonely kind of beauty. Finally, Ben slowed the truck and pointed through the windshield. There she is. Through a gap in the trees, I saw it. The house was a simple, two-story farmhouse, its white paint peeling. A wide porch wrapped around the front, its roof sagging slightly in the middle. To one side stood a huge red barn, its doors shut tight. Everything was draped in a thick, undisturbed blanket of snow. The only tracks were the ones our truck was now making. It looked like a place that time had forgotten, a photograph from 100 years ago. It looked sad and neglected, but it also looked solid. It was still standing. Ben helped me unload my things onto the porch. "You sure you'll be all right up here?" he asked, his eyes full of genuine concern. "It gets real quiet and real cold." "I'll be okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Well, Dad said to tell you if you need anything, just walk down to the main road. Someone will be by eventually. Good luck." He gave me a small wave, got back in his truck and rumbled back down the hill, leaving me alone in the profound, ringing silence of the snow-covered farm. My farm. I stood on the porch for a long time, just looking. The air was still and frigid. My breath plumed in front of me. This was it. The end of the line, the beginning of everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old iron keys. My hand was shaking so badly, it took me 3 tries to fit the largest key into the lock on the front door. It turned with a loud, grating screech, the sound of metal on metal after a decade of disuse. I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and pushed the door open. A wave of cold, stale air rushed out to meet me, carrying the scent of dust, of old wood, of time itself. I stepped across the threshold, out of the life I had known, and into the one that had been waiting for me all along. The inside of the house was a world of shadows and shapes draped in white sheets. Every piece of furniture, the sofa, the armchairs, the tables, was hidden, preserved like a ghost of what it once was. Dust motes danced in the slivers of pale afternoon light that cut through the grimy windows. It was colder inside than it was out, the kind of deep, penetrating cold that settles into the very bones of a place. My boots echoed on the wooden floorboards as I moved deeper into the house, my duffel bag and supplies dropped by the door. I walked from room to room on the ground floor. The living room was dominated by a huge stone fireplace, its hearth black with the soot of 1,000 fires. I imagined my grandfather sitting here on a cold night, the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. Next was a dining room with a long covered table, and then the kitchen. The kitchen was the heart of the house. I could feel it. A big cast-iron stove stood against one wall. The countertops were worn smooth with use. A calendar hung by the back door, the picture a faded landscape of autumn trees. The month was November. 10 years ago. Time had stopped here on the day he died. The silence was the most powerful thing. It was a physical presence, a heavy blanket over everything. In the group home there was always noise, a TV blaring, people shouting, the hum of the building's machinery. Here, the only sound was the whisper of the wind outside and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was completely, utterly alone. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. I knew I needed to get some light and heat going before the sun went down. I found a spot on the kitchen table, cleared away a decade of dust with my sleeve, and set up one of the kerosene lamps George had sold me. My hands were clumsy with cold as I filled it, trimmed the wick, and struck a match. The flame sputtered to life, small and fragile at first, then growing into a steady, warm, golden glow. It pushed back the shadows, revealing the room in more detail. The pattern on the linoleum floor, the handles on the cupboards, the water pump at the sink. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. I lit the second lamp and carried it with me as I continued to explore. There was a small room off the living room that looked like a study. A heavy wooden desk sat against one wall, a straight-backed chair tucked neatly beneath it. Unlike the other rooms, nothing here was covered. It was as if the owner had just stepped out for a moment. A pipe lay in a ceramic ashtray on the desk, a few flakes of tobacco still in its bowl. A stack of books on woodworking and farming sat on one corner. And in the very center of the desk, placed with deliberate care, was a single, sealed envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. I moved closer, the lamplight casting my long, dancing shadow on the wall behind me. Neatly written on the front of the envelope, in a strong, slightly slanted script, were 2 words: for Leo. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. A message from the past. A voice from the ghost who haunted this house. I picked it up. The paper was thick and creamy, my name written in his hand. It made him real in a way the deed and the keys never could. He had sat in this chair, at this desk, and written my name. He had thought of me. I sank into the dusty chair, my legs suddenly weak. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. It was several pages long, filled with the same strong handwriting. I held it close to the lamp and began to read. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, it means you have come home. It means you are 18, a man, and that I have been gone for a very long time. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for so much. I hope that by the time you finish this letter, you will begin to understand. First, I want you to know that you were never, not for one single day, abandoned. You were protected. There is a difference. When your father died, a part of your mother died with him. She was a wonderful, bright, loving woman, but grief took hold of her and wouldn't let go. She fell into a darkness that I couldn't pull her out of, and it became a place that was no longer safe for a little boy. The hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life was to let you go into the care of the state. I knew they would be clumsy. I knew they would be cold, but I also knew they would feed you and clothe you and put a roof over your head. They would keep you safe, which was more than I could promise, and certainly more than your mother could. My heart broke the day they took you, and I don't think it ever truly mended. My plan was always to get you back, but then I got sick. The doctors told me I didn't have much time. I had a choice to make. I could bring you back here, to this farm, to be raised by a dying old man, only to be uprooted again when I was gone. Or I could make sure that you had a place to come back to when you were old enough to make it your own. A foundation, a place to stand. I chose the foundation. I set up the trust, paid Mr. Davies, and I prayed. I prayed that you would grow up strong and kind. I prayed that you would find your way back here, and I prayed that you would forgive me. This house, this land. It's not much, Leo. It's old and it's stubborn. It will take work, but it's yours. It's been in our family for 3 generations. Your great-grandfather built that barn with his own 2 hands. Your mother took her first steps in that kitchen. You used to play on the floor in front of the fireplace, laughing as you chased the dust bunnies. There are memories soaked into the wood of this place. Our memories. Your memories, even if you don't recall them. I don't know what kind of man you've become. The system can be hard on a boy's spirit, but I know who you came from. You have your mother's fire, and I hope a little of my stubbornness. Don't let the world make you hard. Don't let your past define the man you will be. You have a chance here for a new beginning, a real one. This house is full of secrets. Look around, learn its history. It's your history, too. This is your home now, Leo. I hope you'll have it. With all my love, your grandfather, William. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through the tears that streamed down my face. I didn't even realize I was crying at first. It was a silent, hot, and heavy grief. A decade's worth of pain and confusion finally being released. I cried for the little boy who believed he'd been thrown away. I cried for the mother I barely knew, lost to a grief I couldn't comprehend. And I cried for the old man who had made an impossible choice, who had loved me enough to let me go, who had died alone in this silent, cold house, praying for a future he would never see. The story I had told myself my entire life. The story of the unwanted kid, the orphan, the discard of society. It was all a lie. It wasn't a story of abandonment. It was a story of a desperate, heartbreaking, and profound love. He hadn't thrown me away. He had built me a lifeboat, and I was finally standing in it. The letter didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years of loneliness, the feeling of being other, the scars I carried from a childhood spent in limbo. But it reframed it. It gave it meaning. The cold, institutional narrative of my life had been replaced by something else, something deeply personal and painful and beautiful. I sat there in the growing darkness, the only light in the house coming from the small lamp, its glow a tiny beacon in a vast sea of cold and shadow. The letter lay open on the desk in front of me. The house was no longer just an old, empty building. It was an inheritance. It was a sanctuary. It was a promise. The cold didn't feel so sharp anymore. The silence didn't feel so empty. It was filled with the presence of the man who had written these words. I wasn't alone here. I had come home, and for the first time, I understood what that word truly meant. The emotional storm that broke inside me left me hollowed out, exhausted, but strangely calm. The grief was a clean fire, burning away a decade of anger and resentment, leaving behind a raw, tender space where something new could grow. I carefully folded my grandfather's letter and tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket, keeping it close to my heart. It felt like a shield. The immediate, practical needs of survival began to assert themselves. It was getting dark, and the temperature was dropping fast. I needed to build a fire. I found a stack of dry, seasoned wood in a box next to the fireplace, along with a pile of old newspapers. I laid the fire clumsily, remembering a survival show I'd once seen on a TV in one of the group homes. It took 3 tries, but finally, a small flame caught the kindling, and with a gentle breath it grew, licking at the larger logs. Soon, a real fire was crackling in the hearth, pushing a wave of radiant heat into the room and painting the sheet-draped furniture in flickering orange light. I pulled one of the armchairs closer to the fire, leaving its white sheet on like a ghostly shroud, and sat down. I opened one of the cans of soup George had given me and ate it cold, straight from the can, my eyes fixed on the flames. It was the most satisfying meal I'd ever had. Each bite was an act of independence. Each flicker of the fire was a tiny rebellion against the cold. When I finally felt warm enough to move, I decided to explore the second floor. With a lamp in one hand, I climbed the creaking staircase. The upstairs was just as still and silent as the downstairs. There were 3 bedrooms. The first one was small and simple, likely a guest room. The second was larger, with faded floral wallpaper peeling at the corners. This must have been my mother's room. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, trying to feel her presence, trying to picture her as a young girl living in this house, dreaming of a future that would never come to be. It was too much. I gently closed the door and moved on. The last room at the end of the hall was the master bedroom. It was the largest room, with 2 big windows that would, in the daylight, probably look out over the fields. A large, sturdy-looking wooden bed frame stood against the far wall. A thick layer of dust covered everything. This was his room, my grandfather's, the place where he slept, where he read, where he died. The air here felt heavier, more concentrated with memory. I ran my hand along the wooden dresser, leaving a clean streak in the dust. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just connecting with the space, with him. His letter had said the house was full of secrets. It had told me to look around. I remembered a specific line. "This is your home now, Leo. I hope you'll have it." It wasn't just a turn of phrase, it was a challenge. And then another line came back to me, one that I had skimmed over in my emotional haze. "There are memories soaked into the wood of this place. Listen, if you've made it this far into my story, maybe you know what this feels like. To have the entire story of your life ripped up and rewritten in a single afternoon. It's a terrifying, disorienting feeling. You feel like you're floating, like you have no anchor. But sometimes that's the only way to find the truth. It's the only way to find the foundation that's been waiting for you underneath all the rubble." Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment that changed everything you thought you knew. I want to hear about it. This community is built on sharing those moments. We read them all. Now, let's get back to that cold, quiet farmhouse and the secrets hidden in the wood. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind, soaked into the wood. I looked down at the floor. The floorboards were wide planks of old, dark wood, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. They looked solid, seamless. But his words felt like a clue. I got down on my hands and knees, the lamplight casting a small pool of yellow around me. I started near the walls, running my hands over the boards, pressing down, looking for anything unusual. I worked my way across the room, the methodical search focusing my scattered thoughts. And then, under the spot where the bed was, I felt it. A slight give. A board that moved just a fraction of an inch when I put my weight on it. My heart started to beat faster. I pushed the heavy bed frame aside. It scraped against the floor with a groan that echoed through the silent house. There it was. One of the floorboards had its nail head sitting slightly higher than the others. Using the tip of the key to the front door, I pried at the edge. It was stiff, but it lifted. Beneath it was a hollow space, a small, dark compartment cut between the floor joists, and nestled inside was a metal box, the kind people use for cash or important documents. It was heavy. I lifted it out and carried it back downstairs, setting it on the floor in front of the fireplace. The box wasn't locked. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. My eyes widened. The first thing I saw was money, stacks of cash bundled together with rubber bands. It wasn't a fortune, but to me, it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Tens, 20s, 50s. I didn't dare count it. It felt like sacred treasure. Underneath the cash was a thick brown envelope, even heavier than the first one. And beneath that, a collection of old photographs. I picked them up carefully. The first was of a young couple, laughing, standing in front of the red barn. My mother and a man I assumed was my father. They looked so happy, so full of life. Another photo showed my grandfather, younger and stronger than I remembered him, holding me as a baby. He was looking down at me with an expression of such pure, unadulterated love that it made my chest ache. There were photos of me as a toddler, running through the tall grass, my mother chasing after me. These weren't just pictures, they were proof. Proof of a life I had lost. Proof that I was loved, that I was wanted, that I had belonged somewhere. Finally, I picked up the thick envelope. My name was on it again. Leo, Part 2. I opened it. Another letter and a sheaf of official-looking documents. I read the letter first. Leo, if you found this, you're more resourceful than I even hoped. This box contains the practical side of your inheritance. The other letter was for your heart. This one is for your head. The money is what I could save. It's not much, but it's everything I had. I sold my old truck, my tools, anything of value that wasn't the land itself. It's for you. Use it to get on your feet. Use it to buy food, to get the power turned back on, to pay for whatever you need. Don't be proud. It's a gift. It's the help I couldn't give you in person. But it comes with a warning. This money is a tool, not a solution. It won't be enough to solve the farm's biggest problem, the back taxes. The documents in this envelope will show you the numbers. They are big. They are scary. I paid them for as long as I could after your mother got sick, but my own health failed before I could see it through. The debt has been growing for years, and that debt has attracted vultures. A development company called Ridgeview Corporation has been sniffing around this land for years. They want to build luxury vacation homes, or a golf course, or some other damn fool thing. They know about the tax debt. They have been sending letters, making lowball offers to the trust, hoping to snatch this place for pennies on the dollar. Mr. Davies has held them off, but now that you are the owner, they will come for you. They will be polite. They will be charming. They will offer you what seems like a lot of money. They will tell you this farm is a burden, a ruin, a weight around your neck. They will try to convince you to sell. Do not listen to them. They are selling an easy escape, but what they are buying is your history. They are buying your future. The money they offer you will run out. But the land, Leo, the land is forever. This place is your anchor in the world. Don't ever let it go. The money in this box is enough to make a start. It might be enough to negotiate a payment plan with the county on the taxes. It will be hard. It will be a fight. But you come from a long line of fighters. You have more strength in you than you know. The choice is yours. It always has been. Take the developer's money and run, and I will not blame you. You deserve an easy life after the one you've had. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to fight for this place, then you will truly be my grandson. You will be home. Stay strong. William. I put the letter down, my mind reeling. The numbers on the tax documents were staggering. It was an impossible amount of debt. But the money in the box was also real. It was a weapon, a chance. He had armed me. He had given me not just the history and the love, but the practical tools to defend it. The warmth of the fire, the weight of the money, the love in those letters. It all combined into a powerful, grounding force. The fear I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a slow-burning, unfamiliar feeling. Determination. My grandfather had believed in me. He had trusted me with his legacy, with our family's home. He had trusted me to be strong enough to make the right choice when the time came. I looked around the room, at the shrouded furniture and the dancing shadows. This wasn't a ruin. It was a kingdom. It was my kingdom. And as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, I made a silent promise to the ghost of the man who had given it all to me. I would not let them take it. I would fight. The next 2 days were a blur of labor and discovery. I spent my time getting the house into a livable state. I took the sheets off the furniture, shaking out a decade of dust onto the floor, and then swept the floors clean. I washed the windows, letting in the bright winter sunlight. With each chore, the house felt less like a museum and more like a home. I found the water pump in the kitchen still worked, bringing up icy, clean water from the well. I learned how to keep the fire in the hearth going steadily, a constant, warm heartbeat in the center of the house. I made a bed for myself on the sofa in front of it, using the blanket George had sold me and another I found in a cedar chest upstairs. I explored the property, my boots sinking deep into the snow. The barn was magnificent, a huge, cathedral-like space filled with the scent of old hay and leather. Most of the tools were gone, sold as my grandfather had said, but the structure was sound. I walked the perimeter of the fields, the land rolling gently under its white blanket. It was vast. It was quiet. It was mine. I was learning the rhythms of the place, the way the light moved across the valley during the day, the sound the old house made at night as it settled in the cold. I was more alone than I had ever been in my life, but I had never felt less lonely. I was a part of something. I had a purpose. On the third day, the day before Christmas, a car came up the long, winding driveway. It was a sleek, black SUV, the kind that looked completely alien in this rustic landscape. It crunched to a stop, and a man in an expensive-looking suit and shiny shoes stepped out. He looked around, a faint look of distaste on his face as he navigated the snow-covered path to the porch. I knew instantly who he was. The vulture had arrived. I met him at the door. "Leo Novak?" he asked, extending a hand. His handshake was firm and practiced. "My name is Richard Henderson. I'm with the Ridgeview Corporation. I've been in touch with your family's lawyer for some time. I was sorry to hear about your grandfather." His sympathy was as thin as ice on a puddle. "What do you want?" I asked, not inviting him in. He gave a polite, predatory smile. "Straight to business. I like that. Mr. Novak, our company has been interested in this property for a very long time. It's a beautiful piece of land. We have a vision for it. A community of high-end homes that would blend in with the natural beauty of the area. You want to pave it over?" I said flatly. He chuckled, unbothered. "Not at all. We want to enhance it. But let's be frank. This property, as it stands, is a significant liability. The house is in desperate need of repairs that would cost a fortune. And then there's the matter of the outstanding tax lien with the county. It's a substantial figure, a weight that someone your age shouldn't have to carry." He was using the exact words my grandfather had warned me about. A burden, a weight. "We are prepared to make you a very generous offer," Henderson continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "We will purchase the property as is. We will assume all tax liability, and we will write you a check for $250,000. The number hit me like a physical blow, $250,000. It was an astronomical sum. It was enough to go anywhere, do anything. Buy a car, a condo in the city. Never work a day for years. It was the easy escape my grandfather had written about. A golden ticket out of the struggle before it even began. For a wild, dizzying moment, I saw that life flash before my eyes. The freedom, the lack of responsibility, the end of all my problems. Henderson saw the flicker of temptation in my eyes. He pressed his advantage. "Think about it, Leo. A clean break, a fresh start, with a significant nest egg to get you going. You could go to college, travel, anything you want. This place, it's the past. It's a beautiful, sentimental memory, but it's an anchor. I'm offering you the chance to cut the rope and sail away." I looked past him, at the red barn standing proud against the blue winter sky. I thought of the pictures of my parents, laughing in the sun. I thought of my grandfather, sitting at his desk, pouring all his love and hope into 2 letters. I thought of the choice he had made, to give me a foundation instead of a few more years with a dying man. He had given up everything to give me this anchor. My choice was already made. It had been made the moment I read his words. I looked back at Mr. Henderson, my gaze steady. "The answer is no." His smile faltered. "I don't think you understand the situation you're in. The county will foreclose on this property eventually. You'll be left with nothing. My offer is the only way you walk away with anything." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This farm is not for sale, not now, not ever. It's my home." The politeness vanished from Henderson's face, replaced by a flash of irritation. He saw he had lost. "You're making a mistake, kid, a big one. You're choosing a pile of rotting wood and a mountain of debt over a real future. When the county auctions this place off, don't come crying to us. The offer is off the table as of today." "I won't," I said. I stepped back and closed the door in his face, the solid thud echoing through the house. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, a mixture of terror and exhilaration coursing through me. I had done it. I had faced the vulture, and I hadn't backed down. I had chosen the harder path. I had chosen to fight. I had chosen home. The immediate aftermath of Henderson's visit was a quiet resolve. The threat he made hung in the air, a promise of a difficult road ahead, but it didn't break my spirit. It forged it. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve making a plan. I took out the cash from the metal box and counted it carefully. It was just over $15,000, a fortune to me, but a pittance against the tax debt. Still, my grandfather was right. It was a start. It was leverage. Christmas morning, I woke to the first rays of sun streaming through the clean kitchen windows, turning the dust motes into a golden river. It was the first Christmas I hadn't woken up in an institution. There was no tree, no presents, but I had something better. I had a purpose. I made coffee on the old wood stove and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the snow-covered fields. It was the most peaceful I had felt in my entire life. The day after Christmas, I bundled up, packed a small bag with the letters, the tax documents, and a good portion of the cash, and I started walking. It took me over an hour to get down to the main road. Just as Ben had promised, it wasn't long before a truck slowed down, and a local farmer offered me a ride into the next town over, the one with the bus station. From there, I bought a round-trip ticket back to the city. I walked into Mr. Davies' law office without an appointment. His secretary looked surprised to see me, but when I said my name, she showed me right in. Mr. Davies was sitting behind a large mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of books. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Novak," he said. "I confess I was not expecting to see you again so soon. I assume your visit to Havenwood was illuminating." "It was," I said, taking the seat opposite him. "I'm keeping the farm." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Are you?" Ridgeview's offer was substantial, and the tax liability is, to put it mildly, daunting. "I know. My grandfather warned me about both." I slid the second letter across the desk. He left me this and this. I placed a thick bundle of cash on the polished wood between us. He called it a tool. I need your help to use it. I want to pay the back taxes. I want to negotiate a payment plan with the county. I want you to be my lawyer. Mr. Davies picked up the letter and read it. his expression softening as he did. When he finished, he looked from the letter to the cash and then to me. For the first time, I saw a genuine smile touch his lips. "Your grandfather was a good man, Leo, stubborn as a mule, but a good man. He would be very proud of you." He pushed the money back towards me. "Keep your cash for now. You'll need it. For the farm, my fee can wait. Let's see what we can do about saving your home." The legal battle wasn't quick or easy. It took months of negotiations, paperwork, and stressful phone calls. Mr. Davies was a master, arguing for leniency, pointing out my age and circumstances, and presenting a realistic payment plan that used a portion of the money my grandfather left as a down payment. Ridgeview Corporation even tried to intervene, offering to pay the entire debt to the county in exchange for the title, but their predatory tactics worked against them. The county officials, it turned out, had a soft spot for an underdog trying to save his family's legacy. In the end, we won. They agreed to the payment plan. The farm was safe, as long as I kept up my end of the bargain. I moved back to the farm permanently. I used the money to get the power turned back on, to fix the leaky roof, and to buy a used pickup truck. I got a job working for George at the general store in town, stocking shelves and running the register to make the monthly tax payments. Every evening, I would come home to the farmhouse, tired but satisfied, and work on the house, sanding floors, patching plaster, painting walls. I was slowly, painstakingly bringing it back to life. The work was hard, the loneliness was real sometimes, but every time I felt like giving up, I would take out my grandfather's letters and read them again. I would look at the photograph of my parents, so young and full of hope. And I would remember that I wasn't just fixing a house. I was rebuilding a home. I was honoring a sacrifice. I was earning my place in the world. As the snow melted and spring arrived, the land began to wake up. Green shoots pushed their way through the brown earth. The trees budded. The world turned from white and gray to 100 shades of green and gold. I wasn't a farmer, not yet, but I started reading my grandfather's old books. I learned about crop rotation, about soil health, about the rhythms of the seasons. I cleared a small patch of land near the house and planted a vegetable garden. When the first tiny seedlings poked through the soil, I felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost knocked me over. I had made something grow. I was no longer Leo Novak, the kid from the system. I was Leo Miller Novak, the man from the Miller farm. My story had changed. I had a past now, a real one, and I had a future that I was building with my own 2 hands on my own land. The scars were still there, they always would be, but they were a part of a larger story now, a story of resilience and of love that was strong enough to cross time and death. Home isn't always a place you're given. Sometimes it's a place you have to fight for, a place you have to build, board by board, memory by memory. It's not about 4 walls and a roof, it's about the foundation underneath. It's the story that holds you up. My grandfather didn't just leave me a piece of land, he left me a new story and the chance to write my own ending. It's an inheritance of love, of sacrifice, and of the stubborn belief that everyone deserves a place to stand. If this story meant something to you, if it gave you a little bit of hope, then I hope you'll join our community. Subscribe to the channel, and more importantly, share your own story of finding home in the comments below, whatever that word means to you. Because every one of those stories deserves to be heard, and every one of us deserves a place to belong. Thank you for listening.